In December 2007, there were two soldiers stationed at Fort Greely military base in northern Alaska. One was Sergeant Daniel Carter, the other Corporal Michael Reeves. That night, they were both on a routine patrol. It was one of Alaska's infamous freezing nights. The thermometer showed minus 30 degrees. The snow was knee-deep. The sky was completely dark. Nights in this region sometimes lasted more than 18 hours. Daniel and Michael were assigned to check an old radar station about 5 kilometers from the base. This station had been abandoned years ago, according to official records. The reason was simply a technical malfunction, but another rumor circulated among the soldiers. It was said that some soldiers who had served at this station heard strange noises at night and that a few had been discharged due to psychological problems. Of course, Daniel didn't believe it. Old soldier stories, he said. Michael, however, was a little more nervous. It was around 1:40 a.m. Two soldiers were heading towards the station on snowmobiles when Michael suddenly raised his hand. "Stop!" Daniel slammed on the brakes. The sound of the engine stopped and the surroundings fell completely silent. Only the sound of the wind could be heard. Michael tilted his head. "Did you hear that?" Daniel frowned. "What did I hear?" Michael pointed to the dark forest. "Someone was talking." Daniel laughed. "At this hour? In this weather?" But then, they both heard it. A very faint sound from afar. It sounded like someone was whispering, but the words were unintelligible. Daniel frowned. "Maybe there's another patrol team." Michael shook his head. "No, that sound. It's very close, but at the same time very far away." The sound stopped after a few seconds. The forest fell silent again. Daniel shrugged. It could be the sound of the wind, but Michael's face was deathly pale. "No, the wind doesn't talk." About 10 minutes later, they reached the radar station. It was an old concrete structure. Rusty antennas still stretched towards the sky. The door was half open. Daniel stopped. Who left the door open? It was known that this station hadn't been used for years. When they went inside, the air was strangely warm. Michael looked around in surprise. The heater seemed to be working, but the electrical system should have been shut off long ago. The walls were covered in old wires. Some rooms contained old computer parts. Everything was dusty, but something on the floor caught their attention. Footprints. Fresh footprints. The snow had been carried inside from the front of the door. Daniel bent down. "These are new," Michael whispered. "So there's someone here." Just then, Daniel reached for his radio. "Base, this is Carter. We're at the old radar station. There might be movement inside. Only static came from the radio." Then, a strange voice was heard, but it wasn't the base commander's voice. The voice from the radio was muffled and slow. "Help." Daniel froze. Michael's eyes widened. "This isn't the base?" The same voice came from the radio again. "Please, don't open the door." Daniel frowned. "The door?" Just then, a metal door slammed shut at the back of the station. They both flinched. The sound came from the dark corridor. Daniel raised his flashlight. The corridor was narrow and long. As the light advanced, old military posters appeared on the walls. Michael whispered, "Is anyone there?" Silence. Then a shadow moved at the end of the corridor. Daniel shouted, "Who's there?" No answer, but footsteps were heard. Dragging footsteps. Michael's breathing quickened. "This isn't good." Daniel started to move forward, but the shadow was stepping out of the light, as if it was deliberately trying to stay in the dark. Finally, they reached a corner. Daniel turned quickly, but there was no one there. Only an old door in the wall. A rusty sign hung on the door. "Cold warehouse, unauthorized entry forbidden." Michael swallowed. "I think we should go." But Daniel looked at the door. The door looked scratched from the inside. There were deep fingernail marks. Just then, there was a knocking sound from behind the door. "Toke, toke, toke." Michael recoiled. "No, this isn't good." Then a voice came from inside, but it didn't sound like a human voice. It was as if someone was just learning to speak, struggling to pronounce the words. Open. Daniel and Michael looked at each other. The voice came again. Cold. Then there was a violent blow to the door. Bam! The door shook. Michael shouted, "We're getting out of here." But just as they were about to turn back, all the lights in the station went out at once. Everywhere was plunged into pitch darkness. Only Daniel's flashlight was on. And at that moment, something was standing at the other end of the corridor, a human-sized silhouette. Its arms were abnormally long, and its head was bowed much more than it should have been. Michael whispered, "Daniel, that's not a soldier." The flashlight flickered, and that thing took a step. Then another. There was no sound of footsteps. It seemed to glide across the ground. Daniel raised his gun. "Stop!" But that thing didn't stop. Just as it entered the light, Michael saw something he would never forget in his life. That thing had no face, only there was a deep, dark void, and from that void came the voice they heard on the radio. "Help! Escape!" Michael shouted. "Run!" They both ran towards the door. The sound of metal dragging came from behind them. It seemed as if that thing was knocking over the equipment on the ground as it moved forward. Daniel opened the door. They both darted out. They jumped onto the snowmobiles. The moment they started the engine, a non-human scream rose from inside the station. The sound echoed through the forest, and then it suddenly stopped. Michael shouted, "Run!" They both ran towards the door. A metallic dragging sound followed them. It sounded like something was knocking over equipment on the ground as it moved forward. Daniel opened the door. They both darted out. They jumped onto their snowmobiles. The moment they started the engine, a non-human scream rose from inside the station. The sound echoed through the forest, and then it suddenly stopped. When they returned to base, they told their commander everything. But the commander's face changed, because there was a secret report about the old radar station. A soldier who served there in 1972 was locked in a cold storage room and froze to death. But the interesting thing was this: when the soldier's body was found, there were hundreds of scratches on the inside of the door. And the last sentence in the report was, "He knocked on the door repeatedly before he died." Daniel and Michael were never sent to that area again. But years later, Michael said in an interview, "What we saw that night wasn't a soldier asking for help. It was something else that wanted us to open the door." And the most terrifying thing, when they returned to base, Daniel's radio was still on, and the recording device had recorded a single sentence over and over again. "Why did you let me in?" If you liked the video, don't forget to like, comment, and follow.